Welcome to the Get Offset podcast. My name is Emily.
And my name is Andrew.
Today we're going to talk about...
Spotify?
Yeah, Spotify. A little bit, yeah. Kind of some general Spotify-ing.
Right.
I don't know.
Some sort of like stream of consciousness.
Stream of streaming consciousness. No.
Don't cross streams?
Don't cross streams until the very end of the movie.
Right. You got to break. It always kills you. Like if they're like, "Oh, that's the one thing you like. Don't press the red button. Don't do that." I'm like, and that's gonna be what saves the day at the very end of the movie.
Yeah. Well,
like, the future, like never press that, and like, oh, of course, like that does it.
I don't remember that part of that movie, but I remember crossing streams in Ghostbusters.
That was a good one. One of my favorite movies, Fanboys, that like flips that trope on its head, where they've got like the red button in the van. It's like that's light speed, never touch it, or whatever. And they finally get around to using it at one point to in a getaway scene, and it ends up failing miserably. And they just love when they just turned it on its head, and it's supposed to be like the magic button to get them out of a bad situation. They're like, and nope,
didn't happen.
Nope,
didn't work out.
In jail.
Yeah. And for everyone listening, wondering why I sound like this, I have terrible allergies pretty much all year long. And a couple times a year, actually more like once a month or so, my allergies are so bad, it feels like I have a cold. And it just happens to be that today's that day.
Yeah, the pollen in Seattle has been stupid lately. I grilled out over the weekend, and I went to go roll my grill out, and it looked yellow.
Ugh,
it was just like covered in that yellowish green pollen. And watching it burn off the grill was actually pretty satisfying when I got it going pretty hot. And I left it out for the night, and I went and checked on it. I grilled out 2 nights ago, so I checked on it yesterday, mid-afternoon. I was taking something out to the backyard, and it was just right back to it. It's all over nasty. The cars, and there's just a blanket of pollen on everything. So I don't blame you at all. It's not your fault.
I know. I know it's not my fault. Like I tried to get in to get allergy shots once, and it's just like the restrictions on. I don't know how anyone has time for allergy shots because the clinic was only open between 9 and 3, and you had to get there 30 minutes before your shot, and you had to stay for like 30 minutes at least afterwards, and then you couldn't like exercise for like an hour and a half afterwards or an hour before, so it means I could not have taken my bike, so then I would have been relying on public transportation, which is slower, and this is when I still had an office job, so I would have had to like it would have taken, I would have had to take half days every single time I had to get an allergy shot. And the way I would have wanted to do it is to, you can get up to like 3 shots a week to start off. And then, you taper to like once a week or once a month. And I would never have been able to get to that point. So.
Right. Now, I had really bad allergies when I was a kid. I lived in California, and I never got like tested to see like what exactly it was I was allergic to. But I got like really nasty like sinus headaches, and like I'm a big sneezer anyways. Just as in like, it's pretty normal for me to have like between 3 and 5 sneezes in a row several times a day.
Like, that's normal for me. Yeah, sneeze attacks.
I get it bad in California like twice a year. I get it really, really bad. I haven't had it in Seattle hardly at all. Like I noticed that like my sinuses start to get a little puffy right about this time, but it doesn't kick in nearly as bad.
Yeah, my sinuses are just inflamed. It's not really even that much snot. It's just they're swollen. And it was worse in Nashville, so I'll give it that.
Well, are you drinking anything to cope with that?
Water.
Lots of water?
Trying to flush it out. Just flush it out.
Good times.
Yeah, though I did have a drink yesterday for the first time. we were able to find a local Mexican restaurant that was doing to-go margarita kits. So they just like give you their pre-made mix in a cup, and then they give you a little bottle of tequila.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it was nice. I've really missed margaritas since this whole thing happened.
As much as I love tequila, like margaritas, I don't get along with margaritas. Is that bad? Like,
I mean,
I
it's sad
love
for
tequila.
you.
I really like tequila.
What's
As an
wrong with
alcohol.
margaritas?
There's something about it that just never sits right. And I'm much more. I love palomas, which is,
That's
in
like
my
a
opinion,
margarita with grapefruit juice.
pretty much, yeah. Those
Yeah.
sit great with me, but there's something about like your average margarita. I'm just like, eh.
Oh,
I
all
don't know.
right. That's fine.
But on that note, I am drinking something a little bit different today. I've been putting this off, and I'm not entirely sure why I have been. But I've got something special to drink today.
Ooh.
More specifically, I've got 6 special somethings to drink today.
Yeah?
And I promise that this won't get out of hand. But I do have a thanks, a shout out, if you will, to send out to a certain Tom Kelly. It's one of our good friends of the show, supporter of the show, and
He's a good
love having.
dude.
Oh, absolutely, and a generous dude. So Tom reached out to me a couple months back. He's like, "Hey, if I sent you some scotch to try, would you drink it?" And I had that immediate gut reaction of, "Isn't this like how serial killers kill people?"
I
So
don't
if I
think
if I
so.
pull over and die before this episode um, comes out, you know that we've got a very sophisticated serial killer on the loose, sending people scotch.
And his name is Tom Kelly.
His name is Tom Kelly. If I don't keel over and die, then huge thank you to Tom. This is actually really, really sweet. So he sent these 6 mini bottles. They look like they're 2. One of them's probably a 2-ouncer, and what the others are 2.5 to 3. So just little taster bottles. But he peeled the labels off of them, and he replaced them with a simple label that says 1 through 6. So I've got bottles number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. Number 6 is the smallest of the bunch. They vary in color. 3 and 4 are looking pretty similar in color, but the goal is for this episode is to kind of just try a couple sips out of each. I've got a proper Glencairn glass in front of me, which is the proper glass to drink Scotch whiskey out of, and I've got some club soda as a palate cleanser in between. Have a little bit of bougie fun here. You guys can all make fun of me. And in an envelope over here on the left, I've got the list of what each of these are. I have not looked at this. I don't know what Scotch whiskeys these are. I can only assume that they're all Scotch. I'm kind of half expecting like one of these to be Jack, and for him to be laughing at me later. Be like, haha, you drank Jack Daniels. You thought it was like an Oban or something like that.
What's wrong with Jack Daniels?
It's a mixer, and that's about all it's good for, in my humble opinion.
Wow, you're drinking the wrong Jack Daniels.
Gentleman Jack is not bad, but just old number 7, I don't know. It's just okay, but for that, you're paying for the name more than anything, and there's 5 whiskeys for the same price I'd rather have.
I think you're paying for the barrel more than anything, if I'm being honest, because they never reuse the barrels, so that's a pretty enormous cost.
That's pretty normal, though.
No, it's not really. It's normal for places to not reuse their barrels. It's
They
really
sell the
cost
barrels.
prohibitive.
Well,
What?
not if you resell them. So the Scotch
Yeah,
industry relies on the bourbon industry because they get barrels that have been aged with bourbon.
right.
Anywho, I'm being. This is maybe this is why I've been putting this off, but this is where the snobby part of Andrew starts to come out. And I'm honestly a really terrible snob because I only sort of know what I'm talking about.
That's
So
most snobs, and that's
I,
why
I
they're
guess
so insufferable.
that's probably why I'm also a pedal person, is because I only sort of know what I'm talking about, but I can fake it really well.
That sounds
So
like most pedal people.
I know I'm out here. I haven't even started drinking yet, and I'm already throwing daggers. Well, so I've got number 1 here. I've got loaded up in the glass, and have a little bit of fun, and just kind of slowly work through these over the course of the episode. So, what's new with you, Emily?
What's new with me? I have allergies. I'm miserable. I feel awful. I would love to take a nap. I had another article published on Reverb.com.
Yeah.
This one was about up and coming YouTube demo artists that you should follow. So check out that article. I'm not in it, as I wrote the article, and it is not ethical to write an article just as a vehicle to promote yourself. But I talked about some friends of the show, like Ann Silikowski. I talked about some people I followed, like Megan L. and Brock Davidson, and I forget Emily Hopkins, the harpist, Devin Blue Whitaker, Ponder Sounds. I think there are a lot of really great artists, demo artists out there who have like fewer than 5,000 subs and create just incredible content. Talk about Demos in the Dark, another friend of the show there. But some of them, like Devin Whitaker, like, wow, those guys, like that guy's videos, they're cinematic. They're just such an incredibly high quality. They're dramatic. They're wonderful. And I love his videos a lot. And I think he should be more well, I think they should all be more popular than they are, but I especially think he should.
That is high praise.
Yeah. But yeah, other than that, this weekend I did a little bit more work for Ghoul Talk, that project that I was doing the overdub session for. So I sent her over some options yesterday for one of the songs. I'll be working on another one through this week. But just kind of in anticipation, I went ahead and I ordered a reamp box from SaturnWorks. So I'm excited about that. Yeah. So that way I can have, I think it'll be good for the demos as well. Cause then I could record something to the interface instead of using the looper pedal, then feed it back around and just do more stuff that hadn't been able to do, that I think will enable me to feature the pedals a little bit better.
That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, so Scotch number 1 in the books. I got a couple of sips out of it, and I'm getting a relatively balanced. I'm going to guess it's almost too peaty to be a Highland, but I'm not sure what it is. It tastes really familiar, and I'm sure this is something I've tried before, and this is the part where I'm like, oh, well, I've tried this before, and it's going to be something I totally haven't, but I don't know what it is. But it's got a nice light peat. It's a pretty relatively medium color, got a little bit of leather on the nose. You want me to keep going with these tasting notes, or am I just going to embarrass myself?
I think that's always embarrassing when you talk about tasting notes. It's something I just like can't bring myself to do.
Little bits of stone fruit, a little bit of creme brulee. It's kind of nice and balanced. It's not overly sharp. The alcohol isn't very forward, so that makes me think it's maybe something that's been aged a little bit longer. So, yeah.
Yeah, tasting notes are funny because it's just one of those things. It's like,
it's so subjective.
It's subjective. I don't know. I wonder if it sounds kind of like when somebody listens to music and they're like, oh man, that's like straight up Marvin Gaye kind of vibe, mixed with a little bit of Sly and the Family Stone, circa this or that. And I wonder if that's how people who aren't familiar with music, super duper familiar with music, feel when people talk about an artist that they like, just in terms of what else it sounds like. Which is something I don't really like. I'm not a huge fan of that kind of critique of music, so it just kind of reminds me of that.
Well, I'm not typically a fan of critiquing music quite like that either, but the flip side of that is, like, there's a gold standard for whiskey, and less so for music, I think, because music's got so many more genres and There's always something new to be done. And sometimes with specific Scotch whiskey, like it's about nailing the tradition and kind of holding down that this is what it's all about. I don't know.
The traditions for Scotch whiskey. Scotch whiskey. Okay, whatever. I'm just not gonna.
One of my best friends here in Seattle is Scottish. Used to work with a guy, and I'm sure if I can convince the guy to listen to this podcast, he's going to spend the entire time judging me to no end. He's I like going out to drink with him because it makes me feel like such a noob. Because he's tried just about every Scotch whiskey out there you can think of. He remembers all the tasting notes. He really, at least to me, seems knowledgeable. But
everyone has. It's important to have hobbies.
Well, I'm not typically a diehard like Scotch whiskey kind of guy. It's a very expensive hobby, so very grateful for a chance to go through and taste all of these. I'm going to go ahead and give number 1 my thumbs up. I like this one.
Neat. You know what one of my number 1s is?
Jack Daniels?
John Prine. So I want to take a minute because we're already 15 minutes into the episode for some reason. And we've already lost several very important musicians and people in our art and culture space from COVID-19. And one of the first ones that's really left me devastated is the loss of John Prine. I've always been familiar with John Prine's music. My mom is a big music person in that kind of Americana genre, so it's a name I'd heard for forever. And when I finally got to listening to his music, at least partially through the covers that Josh Ritter would do of John Prine, I'm just like, God, that is truly incredible songwriting. I really believe that very few, if anybody, would ever compare to John Prine. And being in Nashville, it's customary to every once in a while you get these stories of your connections to these musicians. And so I remember for my John Prine story isn't even really so much a John Prine story as, I mean, it is. I'll just tell it. Go ahead.
I was just saying, tell it. I was trying to tell you to go ahead.
Okay. Jesus. Okay.
I'm trying to be supportive here. All right.
So it was June of 2010, and it was the weekend of Bonnaroo, and I had gone the year before and was really just lamenting the fact that I hadn't bought tickets to go that year with my friends, some of whom had bought tickets. And I remember like the Thursday and Friday, all I was doing was watching the Bonnaroo live streams and just really being pissed at myself for not going. And Saturday I picked up a shift at the library where I worked at the university, and I picked it up for someone else. I never did it. Didn't really like working weekends, so I thought I would take my mind off the fact that I wasn't at Bonnaroo. So I was like, yeah, and money. So I get to the library, and by the time I get there, basically within 5 minutes of them opening, there's a woman there, and she needs help. Like she's an older woman, not like the standard student age, and she just needed to make copies of something so that she could. So in the library they have books that you can't really check out. You can't take out of the library, but you can have them for like 2 hours at a time. And they're typically books that like everybody needs access to.
Reference books, the encyclopedia, dictionaries, thesauruses.
Yeah, there were a lot, like anything that was like used in a syllabus that semester would be pulled off the regular shelves and placed in this reserve so that, everyone would have access to it when they needed it. Because a lot of people are going to need that book, and they didn't want someone to just bogart it for the entire semester. So I'm helping her scan. It's kind of, the scanners are bad and wonky, and it takes so long that I just like clear the cost on the computer. I'm like, okay, you're not going to owe anything for these copies, because normally they were like 5 or 10 cents a piece. And she's talking, she's like, oh, thank you so much for helping with this. I just, I have to go to Bonnaroo later today. And I'm like, oh man, I so wish I was going to Bonnaroo. I'm really mad that I didn't buy a ticket. And she says to me, well, why don't you go? Like, you should go. I'm like, oh, well, the thing is, like, I can't really afford it, and I think it's sold out. And she says, oh, no. My husband's playing. They gave us way more tickets than we could ever use. I'll run home and I'll bring back a ticket. And
No
was
way.
like, yeah. I was like, oh yeah, sure, sure. And she's like, I'll give you one for a friend. I'm like, yeah, thank you. I'm like, she's like, the thing is, you just have to promise to see my husband play because he's kind of nervous. And I said, oh, great. Who does your husband play for? Which is kind of more the Nashville question. And she said, oh, my husband is John Prine.
No
I
way.
had seen this woman's like Belmont ID, and I hadn't even put it together that her name on her ID was Fiona Prine. I noticed the Fiona part,
That's
but not the Prine
incredible.
part. So she left, came back, and gave me the tickets. And then she gave me her phone number because she said that, I have children, and I know if they were at a festival like this, I'd want them to have every number possible, which my mother really appreciated. And so if you have any trouble, just give me a call. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. So of course we go, the first night I go with my friend Kaylee. We have a lot of fun. We see John Prine, of course, and it's the only time I ever got to see John Prine, but it was magic. It was so good. And then that night, Kaylee and we went back to Nashville because Bonnaroo was just like an hour outside. Next morning, she wakes up. She messages me. She's really sick, but she managed to get her wristband off. So I call my friend Ben, and his wrist is bigger than hers. He can't slip it over, so I cut it and I sew it back together as best I can. And then we get to the grounds, and we have the one guy at the Bonnaroo grounds who's checking wristbands so impeccably. He notices that Ben's has been torn. So he's like, well, do you have your physical tickets? I'm like, yeah, sure. I grab them. And I show them to him, and they're artist tickets. So he calls his boss over, and his boss gives me this real stern look and says, who gave you these tickets? Where did you get these? And I said, John Prine. Well, his wife, Fiona, do we need to give her a call? And he looks at me, he says, right answer. And he gets my friend a new wristband. And so yeah, that's my favorite John Prine story. It's really the one that I'm actually involved in. I have friends in Nashville who are close to that family. Someone who's worked with John for, gosh, probably 8 years. And so my heart really goes out to those people, so especially because, I have a funny story. This was their friend. And I just think that if you want to, if you haven't, you need to listen to John Prine. It's poetry. It's beautiful. And pour yourself a vodka and diet ginger ale and enjoy.
Enjoy indeed. I'm just you've never told me that story before, and I'm just super blown away just listening to you talk about that. And I can't imagine how mind blowing that must have been to go through that.
Yeah, that's generosity of, she was just like, yeah, I'll come back and I'll bring you some tickets. Like nothing. She didn't know me.
That's incredibly generous, and that speaks volumes about the family, for sure.
They were great people. Well, Fiona's still a great person, I am sure.
Right.
So,
well, on a slightly less heavy note, before we hit ads, I've just got number 2. And this one's just straight up bread pudding. It's got to be, I don't know if it's aged in a rum cask or what, but I'm just getting raisins, brown sugar, caramel, just full on bread pudding, just in the nose, and it tastes phenomenal.
Christmassy.
Yeah, it is kind of Christmassy. This one's definitely the darkest of the bunch, which makes me wonder what it was aged in, or rather if there's anything added to it. It's just incredibly sweet. I'm not sure I've tried anything like this before.
Interesting. Sponsors?
Mm-hmm.
This week's episode of Get Offset is sponsored by Tysco Pedals.
Tysco.
Woot woot. I published a demo for their delay pedal, and for $150 new, Wow, that thing has a lot of features. It has, the standard level feedback, which can get into self-oscillation territory really quickly. And time, and then you can also, there's modulation, so you can control the modulation on the delay trails. You can control the depth, and you control the rate. And there's a rate toggle, so the rate can be either slow or fast, and it's just like wow. And you would like this. It has a direct out in addition to your normal mono out. So if you use the direct out, it turns your wet out into just 100% wet for you wet dry board types.
Right. Yeah. The Ibanez DE7 has the dry out like that, and I've definitely used that to great effect in pun intended in rigs before.
Cool. Yeah, so they have that, and then I've been playing around with their boost pedal too, and it's super neat. Also, and it's even cheaper. I don't want to quote myself on a price because I don't remember, but in addition to having level and gain, there are also 3-tone switches. Well, a tone switch with 3 different options, so you can choose your tone. You know what I mean. I
Yeah.
don't
Well, it
have
looks
the
like so. It's
manual
got
in
an
front of me.
option for the internal charge pump for 9 volt to 24 volt.
It also has that. The 24-volt gives it more headroom.
Right. That's got to be crazy. I've got a lot of pedals have charge pumps inside, so you plug it into 9 volts, so it's really running like 18 or even higher than that. I think my MesoFX Ohm V2's got a charge pump in it, so it goes up to 18. But seeing that kind of that toggle for the charge pump is actually really kind of nifty. I don't know if I've ever seen a toggle for that ever before, and then seeing the EQ for the normal treble and flat is kind of fun.
Yeah. And they all sound so different too. It's like it's hard to decide which you like the best. And I was playing around with it, putting it before my Halberd by Electronic Audio Experiments, and woo, yeah, it's cool.
Right. Well, boost has always been an effect where I'm like, that is so boring. And it's always really fun to see when pedal makers come out with a boost that's not like just a one trick pony. It's got options in it like this. Like this is super neat. It definitely, I feel like this is the kind of boost I should have had years ago that would have helped me understand the effects so much more, to have all the
Yeah.
settings on board and understand how they all play together.
Yeah, and like I get now why there's so much debate about where you put a boost. Like I have the little Cat Dirt Mini, and that's just a very very loud boost. And I'm like, yeah, I'll put that after my drive because I just want it louder for
Right.
solos.
As
But
opposed to
like,
pushing it.
as opposed to pushing an overdrive pedal, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's the sponsor.
24 volt is such a weird like jump too, because I've always seen like 9 to 18 volt jumps. I'm wondering how they did that on the inside. I'll have to look into this later. I'm really curious.
Yeah, it's magic.
I certainly believe that.
Yeah. So this week we kind of went between a couple of potential things to talk about, and we settled on decided to talk about Spotify. Yeah,
Spotify.
Spotify. Spotify. Everybody uses it, and everybody I think a lot of people have mixed emotions about it. If you care about, like, if you're, especially musicians have, I think, mixed
Oh,
emotions about it.
right. I mean, high profile artists in the past have just straight up pulled all of their music from Spotify. I remember Taylor Swift did that for a while, and I think her stuff's back up.
Prince never wanted to put his stuff on Spotify. Famously, Adele, I think, has gone on and off on Spotify.
I think Led Zeppelin's never been on Spotify.
The Beatles hadn't for forever.
A lot of people have it, and I think a lot of the arguments I've seen for taking your music down from is it feels like it's devaluing you as an artist in terms of how little it pays.
And I mean, yeah.
And that's not something I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that.
I'm not going to disagree with it at all. Do you know really anything about the history of Spotify?
I don't know tons of the history. What I can tell you is that I remember The first time I heard about it was my senior year of high school in 2012.
Oh my God.
Oh man.
I mean, okay, I'll tell you why that's wild is because I had Spotify for a year before you even heard of it. I just assumed that it hit everybody immediately in a very big way.
Well, in my defense, I was living in Germany at the time, which has got
That's actually less defensible because Spotify launched in Europe first.
Well, I don't know what to tell you. I felt I was living under a rock. I used to be homeschooled. Fight me. All right. So I heard about it for the first time in 2012. And I remember I was sitting in my AP US government class because I was one of those goody good kids who took AP classes. And my classmate was like, oh, yeah, like, have you ever heard of Spotify? He was like, kind of tell me about it. I'm like, this just sounds like a scam. Like, how do you just have access to all of this? And for reference, like at that point in time, I had like my iTunes library and I had like my couple hundred gigs of music on a hard drive that were all backed up. And that's kind of just like the mode of how I understood like consuming music. And so the idea of having like basically the entire history of discography, for all intents and purposes at my fingertips on a web app was like for free. That seems criminal. How do they possibly monetize enough money to be able to pay out artists well? And I remember having that thought. And being really sketched out by it. And
how do they pay artists well?
well, like it's like, where's the cat? And I didn't really understand that much about business at that point. I was a senior in high school, but it was definitely a question on my mind of like, how does this work? That just doesn't seem immediately intuitive. And it felt very much like this is just like the new torrents, just slightly more,
a lot more legal.
Right.
Yeah, well, Spotify, if it did one thing well, it murdered torrenting. It murdered, what do they call P2P sharing,
right. Peer-to-peer sharing, like LimeWire. I mean,
Kazaa and all that stuff.
Basically, STDs for your computer. We all know
bad ideas. Yeah. I don't know how my computers ever survived Kazaa, but they somehow did. So I was in college when we first heard about. It was 2009. We heard about Spotify. So Spotify was founded in 2006, and it was launched in 2008. I think it was probably Sweden where it launched first. But immediately we had heard it because we were studying music business at the time about this thing. It was going to be legal, and it was like you listen to an ad to listen to a song. So I thought the way I visualized it was that you would have access to the song, but you'd have to sit through a 30-second spot for every song. So if you kind of listen to it like that, like you're like, oh, well, maybe there's money in it. It turns out there is money in it, but not for artists.
Right.
So they launched in the United States. God, it must have been 2011, 2010, 11. I don't really know. July 2011. So they weren't the only people who did what they did, and they're still not the only people who do what they do. You still have Pandora. I think you still have Rhapsody. Now you have Tidal. Amazon has their own thing. Apple has their own thing. Yeah.
Doesn't Amazon have their own thing too?
I just said that, yeah.
Oh.
Silly. And they had other competitors at the time. The one I remember the most was Groove Shark. And this is almost a digression, but kind of interesting, is that Groove Shark, they did a couple things a little bit differently than Spotify. They tried to position themselves as a value tool for artists and labels in terms of like knowing where your fans are so that you can more effectively route tours, stuff like that. And Spotify, I don't believe they had that information available to artists themselves until very recently. That could be its own episode. But the thing that Groove Shark did that was very, very bad is they were uploading music without permission.
Right.
So they got sued out of existence. Spotify still exists, obviously. It's also, I think, bar none, the biggest of the streaming services. And musicians have gone on record basically since its inception about how it doesn't pay anything almost. And now with COVID-19, artists have lost other revenue streams, so they are. I think what really made me want to talk about this is that Spotify there's a, what do you call it, a petition to have very, what's the word, specific demands that Spotify triple the royalty rate that they pay out to artists.
Right. I mean, all the artists have lost all of their income from concerts for the foreseeable future. And
yeah, if you're not playing concerts, you're not selling as much merch. You're not.
Exactly. I mean, the financial impact on the music industry, we've talked about on the show a couple of times now, is just so incredibly vast and thorough that it's now down to, well, what do we have left and how can we milk that for all of its worth, is kind of how I see that mindset going.
Right. So Spotify refuses to admit what their actual royalty rate is. But, I think everyone's crunched the numbers and everyone acknowledges that their payout to, the publisher is a point, I think it's 0.03 cents.
0.003 cents.
0.003 cents. 0.00318 or something like that if we want to get.
Right. So that's like $3 for every 1,000 streams.
Right, exactly. It's virtually no money. So artists are asking for basically, no. So it is 0.3 cents, Andrew. It's cause it's $.00318.
Oh yeah. So it's 0.00. I can't math.
Yeah, so you need basically what artists are asking for is a penny per play.
Right.
If we want to really just break it down and make it specific.
Right, because you triple that, that's a penny per play, and then so for 1,000 streams, you're looking at $10.
Yeah, and it's not a ridiculous amount of money to ask for. I don't have this breakdown anymore. Handy, I should say. But I think Tidal pays 0.6 cents per stream. So that's already twice as much. And I think, I hate Amazon. I took my music off of Amazon. I think Amazon already pays a penny per stream.
Interesting.
Yes. They don't have the traffic that Spotify does, which I think is what's impacting this.
Interstream.
In-stream sting. No.
Your Springsteen?
Yes.
That's my funny way of saying I'm on number 3, by the way.
Oh, you are? Okay, go ahead.
I am on number 3. This one's, I think this is the lightest of the bunch. Pretty close to number 4 in terms of color. Lot less flavor on the nose. Update on 2, by the way. After I got a couple sips, I got sick of it really quickly. And I don't know if I'll come back to this one. I have a feeling this is something that Melissa's really going to like, so maybe we'll give it to her. But it turned like apple cinnamon-y with way too much raisin in it. It didn't sit with me right. But three's smelling nice and easygoing. I'm going to hazard a guess and say, oh goodness, I don't know what this could be, but I have to assume it's something younger. There's not nearly as much flavor to it, but it's pretty light, easygoing. Not a whole lot to it.
Huh. All right.
I suppose maybe a Space Side, but it does have a decent amount of peat to it, contrary to the color. Anyways, it's not bad. So back to Spotify.
Yeah. So artists are. Do you know what a royalty is? I suppose we should define that because I mentioned it.
It's your slice of the pie for your music and the money that it makes.
Vaguely speaking, but a royalty. If you're paying a royalty on something, it's like a pay per use situation. So it's kind of the opposite of a stock photo. A stock photo you buy, you have a royalty-free license on a stock photo. That means you can reproduce it as much as you want in however the contract is stipulated. So you get
Right.
a royalty-free photo on a stock image. You can use it on your website. You can use it in ads. You can use it on a billboard, in a pamphlet, whatever. It's yours to use, like unlimited uses.
Right. So like,
Almost.
and typically, like I've known a couple of people that have like they produce music specifically for royalty free sales, and they end up selling it. They sell off the right to that song, and they get more money up front for it, but then they don't get any of the royalties long term if it turns out being used for a successful show or something like that.
Right. And you hear about this in it's like selling your publishing rights. So you get money up front, but then you don't get money later on from it. So like the Beatles signed away their publishing rights, their royalty rights for their songs, and still don't have those rights and still don't get money when like the song Revolution is used in a sneaker commercial or whatever. And they also can't prevent that song from being used in the sneaker commercial, which also sucks for them. But so that's so basically that's a payout per stream because that's a royalty on that. Because no, Spotify doesn't have any royalty free licenses for their music, and we can get like that turns into a whole rabbit hole. But so artists are, and I'll include a link to the petition if you want to sign that. Currently it only has 2,000 signatures collected, so it would be really nice for more signatures on this to kind of nudge Spotify toward more appropriately, in my opinion, compensating the artists.
Getting a larger slice of that pie.
Yes, because it is a limited amount of money. You know what really sucks? It's like I see every penny of the pennies I get from Spotify because I'm not signed to a label. Sometimes you hear about people like from the Eagles who wrote songs for the Eagles, and they're only getting paid like $25,000 for a million streams or $10,000 for a million streams because their label takes their cut first, and then the rest kind of filters out.
Well, that was going to be one of my
Don
questions.
Henley
Like, that
or
per
whoever.
stream so like that 3 cents or 0.3 cents per stream, is that like for each person involved, or is that just for whoever's involved in making the song? You split it up from there, and I assume it's the latter.
And specifically, it's the master recording. So whoever owns the masters on it is my understanding. I don't think that has to do with songwriters at all.
Right. Which reminds me of back to Taylor Swift. I remember there's a thing recently about her being in a bit of a tiff with someone over, I forget who it is. Someone else owns the masters, and she was threatening to re-record all of her old music just so she could own it all over again.
Yeah, that is the Big Machine label group. So they signed her to, in my opinion, a vaguely predatory record deal for someone so young to sign. I believe that LeAnn Rimes was kind of in a similar state, and Kesha's in a similar state where they're young. They sign a record deal that has an exorbitant amount of options, which for every option, it's kind of a lie. So it's like, it's basically the label has the option of first refusal for up to 6 albums or whatever. So 6 albums, that's just Kesha's, for example. Kesha is contractually obligated to deliver up to 6 albums for her record label. And if they want to drop her before those 6, that's their prerogative. And she has no legal recourse, but she can't leave them until then.
Right. Which is
it's like a baseball contract.
Right. And it's totally understandable to see a young up and coming someone want to sign someone like that. Like, I'm not in a position to negotiate. This is more or less my big break. This is my chance. It's not as good as I would like it, but I'm just going to take it because it's possibly this or nothing else.
You have no ability.
Like, we've got you exactly where we want you.
Well, you have no clout. You have no bargaining power. You know, Prince was in a similar position where he also said that he was going to re-record all of his old music from his Warner days, including, 1999 and Purple Rain, which ultimately he didn't do. He did re-record 1999 and it was horrible. And I think he just kind of abandoned that project due to boredom. I mean, this was a guy who didn't want to re-record his old stuff.
Right. Well, I'm not sure
But
anyone necessarily does. I mean, with some exceptions, but that's not. You don't wake up one day and is like, I'm just going to re-record that album I did 15 years ago just cause.
well, Prince was so prolific, and not that Taylor Swift isn't prolific, but I mean, it's not like has a vault with 20,000 recordings in it that we know of, and she might. And
Right.
if she does, I would love for her to correct me.
More power to her if she does.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a bit of a digression. Albeit an interesting one.
But it's a tangent that builds out a picture of more of what this industry looks like and how it all, because it's a system, it's an industry, everything plays into each other, and there's no getting around that part of it.
Right. So often a record label owns the masters, and then they pay you a royalty rate after whatever expenses you have accrued with them, and those expenses are they're the things that seem like, oh, the label's taking me out for dinner, the label's putting me up in a posh hotel, the label's got me a seat in first class. No, you're paying for all of those things.
Right.
That's all going.
Cut.
Yeah, that's that's part of your expenses. So that's why it takes so long for artists to ever make money from these record deals, because at the end of the day, they may have like a 90-10 split where the label gets 90%.
Right.
Which, they're 360 deals or whatever. So that's why artists see very little money from Spotify. So and truly,
to clarify a math point you made earlier is about how someone who's only make 25 or 10 grand off of a million streams or so. I mean, with Spotify, 1/3 of a cent per stream, what you're looking at is $3,000 for a million streams. And if that's just going to whoever owns the masters and you're only getting a cut of that, I mean, it doesn't take a lot more extrapolation to reasonably believe that artists, even more professional artists, are not making that much money out of their Spotify.
I mean, no, I was talking about artists on labels making less than 0.3 cents per stream.
Right.
Because of their labels taking that money. So if like someone like me, I'm going to see every penny of those pennies. Someone who has a record. So if I have, that 1,000 streams and I make $3, okay, I have $3 and that's all my money. If you have even an indie type of record deal where you split profits 50-50 after expenses recouped, you're getting $1.50. And then if you're one of these on a major label and you're making maybe 20% of everything you get, well, yeah, that's even less. Like that's less than 50 cents or something. I can't do the math at the top of my head, but
it's not. At this point, we're talking like vending machine change. I mean,
yeah, and that's off of 1,000 streams. And if 10 people bought your record at $10 a piece, I think the math said you would have to stream a song between 10 and 15,000 times to make up to the artist for what you would have paid just buying their CD. So that's another reason,
right. And while
I'm really getting kind of sick of people on the COVID-19 thing saying like, stream your favorite artist. Like just can't just cancel your Spotify membership and buy an album every month.
Right. Well, the flip side of that argument, and the argument that's always been there, is like, sure, you get more money if someone bought your record, but then it's the marketing appeal of the accessibility of allowing people to just stumble upon. Because I mean, I'll be honest, I use Spotify, and you guys I can reevaluate my life choices after this episode, I'm sure. But it's something that I've always kind of used. It's something that's kind of sitting in the background when I work, and it's a part of how I discover new artists. One of the things is like, I'll listen to like whatever generated playlist it makes for me, and if I hear an artist that I haven't heard before, I'm like, oh, that is kind of nice, and I'll go through and it's like, that's how I find a new artist. Or it'll suggest artists that are similar to some of my favorites, and so there's definitely that appeal of you want to be. It makes you more discoverable more accessible to the masses than simply, this is my record, you can buy it in the iTunes shop.
Well, how do you think people are getting on those Spotify lists? Do you think Spotify's really just truly randomly generating these lists and they're not like having their you know, that they're not getting anything out of it. Like I don't,
Well,
I don't, I
I'm
don't
sure there's
know.
an,
I
I'm sure
don't
there's an
know if labels pay extra for Spotify promotion or to get added to playlists, but there's definitely something about the algorithm that seems to begin with less than diverse.
Well,
And I
nothing
haven't
says the
done a
algorithm has to be fair either. I mean, it's not like this is some sort of an ethical, like they have to play by a certain set of rules. If they're in it to make money, no one's getting around that.
well, okay. I don't want to hear anything about algorithms and lack of diversity being about making money because you're not really going to make more money uh, by being not by not being diverse. And like there are studies that generally show that, or that things like country radio saying they don't want to play women because people don't want to hear women and they're in it for money, and then just like that just not being true. But
Oh yeah, I'm
that's
not
that's
contesting
another
that.
digression,
I'm
right?
not
But that's
saying that they're right. I'm just saying that there is an inherent motivation of wanting to make that money, and the same way you see a lot of like big business work is it's all about who you know, and I'm sure there's got to be some sort of element of the folks over at Spotify or buddy buddy with the
mhm.
executives at Capitol Records or whatever, and
Yeah, and I mean
marching that forward.
there are algorithm playlists and there are curated playlists, and you can kind of use your noggin to guess which one's more likely to like. Okay, we could do a whole episode about payola, and I would absolutely love to do a whole episode about payola. But I mean, just talking about Spotify, trying to keep it a little bit more to them about like how are you going to discover music without Spotify? I'm like, well, there are these great radio stations that you can stream for completely free, like
KEXP.
KXP or WFUV, um, college radio stations, local radio, these places still like nonprofit radio still exists and it's awesome.
Can I take a moment to defend my honor?
Sure.
So I do listen to Spotify. However, I don't pay for it because I'm petty, and I refuse. I'd rather listen to the ads than give them my money. So I am at least on some level cognizant of that. And the flip side of that is I am a KEXP amplifier because I think that KEXP is a killer radio station. I do listen to them quite a bit as well. And if you haven't listened to KEXP, just you can listen to them on the web. Like just Google them.
It's
90.3 KEXP.
free.
They're
I think it's
phenomenal.
kxp.org, I think.
Uh, the playlist that they come up with, I mean, they don't use algorithms. It's always disc jockeys. They've got some great DJs that work there that have a really great and a very diverse palette of music. And this is where I absolutely agree with you: is the diversity is incredibly. I think it sells and is very entertaining. The range of music that KXP puts up is phenomenal. I'm
Yeah.
constantly blown away by it.
Oh, totally. And that's before like digging into their in studio sessions and the audio and video content that they're creating there, amazing. And then another way to discover music is reading about it on blogs and stuff. So that's other curated things. I like curated because you get consistency from it that you don't get from an algorithm that's just spitting you what it thinks you want to hear. And I just love the relationships that you can develop with DJs and bloggers and actual curators. It's like joining a gym and you have those instructors that you really really love, and you
Mm-hmm.
have those instructors that like, I'm not going to go to that class because just like you don't like how they do a thing, or it's just like not your vibe, or you just like something better. So, and that's normal and that's fine. And it also, I think fosters community better than Spotify does.
I agree, but for the sake of making the argument, and I see where you're coming from, and I think for getting a quality music consumption experience, that is 100% the way to go. I don't contest that. For a lot of people, though, and your average consumer who isn't necessarily super into music, they're just looking for something to listen to, throwing on the Rap Caviar playlist is sometimes just exactly what they're looking for. It's whatever's new and hip, and it's a combination of old and new, and I'm I have no way to substantiate this, and I'm not going to make this as a claim, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of a, hey, give us a little bit of money and we'll get your new artist on the Rap Caviar playlist.
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
So,
why? Of course that's a thing.
and it's a very low effort. Not a lot of people want to put that effort in. And I think that's where where the value statement is for Spotify is for more of your average consumer, not your, it's not geared for the people who are going to be trying to track down FLAC files or listening on Bandcamp or trying to listen to their local indie artists and whatnot. It's not really who it's tracked for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's independent radio for a reason, and that reason is largely that, it doesn't appeal to everybody. Like, that's just nothing appeals to everybody. And so there are some things about streaming and the internet culture that I like. I do like that it's easier than ever to, it is easier than ever to discover new music. Whatever kind of weird little side tangents that you have in your, musical brain and your heart. I do, I don't want to say, it's very much the opposite of homogenization, the opposite of sameness, but I do miss having the cultural, everybody knows this thing. It doesn't happen as much as I think it used to, in an age of when we only had 30 television stations and the radio stations, where, there weren't as many of them, or they, all had their own. It's now you have that with Adele, you have it with Beyonce, but you don't have I don't know if we're ever gonna have stars like Prince or Madonna, or the 80s stars were really the last, I think, super duper big ones, that I can think of, and I guess 90s stars, everyone knows the name Pearl Jam. I think everyone knows a couple Pearl Jam songs, but
Everyone knows Pearl Jam. Everyone knows Nirvana. I mean, there's a level of that ubiquitous household name status factor, but I also think
shared positive art experiences. That's what we don't have.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, because then you've got big names like Billie Eilish, and just about everybody's heard that name.
Everyone's heard that name, but I've heard one Billie Eilish song, and it was because I was playing a gig. It's because I don't listen to the radio I don't listen to pop radio. I don't spend my time watching MTV anymore. I don't do these things where you're definitely going to come across that. The closest I come to being, sometimes I don't hear pop songs until I go to a ballpark and it's playing between innings, literally. Right. And I'm not alone.
You and I are very different people in that regard, because I have a tendency to listen to some pop radio. I diversify my consumption, but I'm not completely out of touch with what's new. And I certainly know that going past where I'm at in the spectrum, I know tons of people who are all up to date on what's the new. It's like the Kiss FM listeners. It's the people who sit down, they listen to the Rap Caviar playlist, or any of the number of the top playlists that Spotify curates. So, I mean, I think there still is that. It's a little bit more diversified, and I think we're seeing a lot more, not necessarily a lot more pockets than before, because there's always pockets of music and scenes and whatnot. I think it's just a different delivery method. All of that to say, I think that kind of leads into a point I wanted to bring up is I really do think that aspect is alive and well, and the consumption isn't being impacted by COVID-19 as
Spotify?
Much as.
Yes, it is.
Right. Well, it's not reflected in their stock prices that much.
Their stock prices, I think, took a dive in March with everything else, of course, but no, they're seeing way fewer streams post COVID-19 happening.
Yes and no. So I've got the so I've got if you look up the 6-month history here, where we're at today is about 130. It peaked in January at about 100, a little over.
Are you talking about COVID-19 cases?
No, I'm talking about streams for like income for Spotify.
Where are you finding this?
I'm just looking at their stock valuation, which, while not a completely biblical kind of representation of their income, is usually a pretty decent indicator of where they're at as a company. And I'm looking at this, and they're $10 a share higher than they were in October. Like, it was recently as October, like 6 months ago.
But their streams are down 12% in the world, 16% down in the US, and 20% in Italy, and another very hard hit country. Their streams are down.
Well, so then the follow-up question to that is, even with this petition, can Spotify, can they afford to follow through on this petition if their hearts were enlightened, if they got their morals in order and they decide they want to start paying people fairly, could they afford to do that with their business model?
I mean, I think so. I don't think that paying royalties is really a big.
Should they? Absolutely. I'm not sure anyone with half a heart is going to disagree on the fact that I think that they really should be. I really don't think that's the question so much as, can they afford to? Is that tenable for their business model? And I guess I can't really answer that without fully looking at their numbers.
So with publicly traded companies, I know that you can basically look up and see like how profitable are they. I haven't done this because I actually keep forgetting that they're a publicly traded company. Spotify investor report, I think. So their financials. I don't think their Q2 financials are available. None of their financials for the year are available.
A lot of Q2 stuff hasn't come out, which is partly what's got me a little worried that the little bump we're seeing in the stock market right now is not going to last for that long once the numbers start coming out on quarterly earnings. But that's me starting to talk a little bit more corporate. Granted, we are talking about a very corporate company, organization, whatever you may have, as far as Spotify goes. So,
yeah. So I mean, they have, again, they're reporting from their own data that streams are down. So, I mean, obviously they're being affected by this. Their cash flow, is this in millions of $169 million in Q4 of last year? Their net cash, their operating margin, gross profit, I see the number 474. I don't know if this is in 100,000s or not. I would think that they can probably afford it, though.
Right. So, I mean, my point is just simply this. In an ideal world, absolutely Spotify should be. I think it's, in my opinion, I think it's predatory to offer such low rates, even with the benefits that I've discussed and kind of pushed a little bit. I think there are some marketing benefits in terms of reach and depending on the audience you're going for and kind of asserting yourself in a genre. I certainly think that there are some benefits to be had there, but I don't think those benefits are worth the cuts that you're taking in a stream. And I certainly think that Spotify has pushed really hard to define what a stream is worth, as opposed to what has been in it's asserted itself as the gold standard in the industry, given its popularity. And I would love to push back on that. The flip side of that is, without getting super into their numbers, it is worth asking the question, is that, are they able to do that and still maintain the outreach that they've got today and maintain the infrastructure and the overhead that they need to make the service available worldwide?
Well, listen, so they just announced like that they have, well, I wouldn't say they announced that they would have this sort of COVID-19 fund. So Spotify will match donations. This is important because the headlines all say to donate $10 million. So they've set up a COVID-19 music relief project through which users will be recommended verified organizations that they can donate to, and Spotify will match those donations up to $10 million. It's like, it's just things like this. It's like, these are nice, but like, I think that it would be more beneficial to just always pay artists what they're worth versus, doing this big grand gesture that they can probably write off later. They will write these donations off versus just paying artists in the first place. So they're doing this for a $10 million tax break. Makes me mad. Like, I'm glad that they are saying that they will do this, but I would be very surprised if user donations get anywhere near $10 million.
Right. I mean, not sure it's any secret that big companies as a whole, the whole purpose of them having like philanthropic kind of philanthropic, good gravy, I can't speak today. Philanthropic parts of their organization is for the tax write-off. I mean, it's about gaming the tax laws, and that ultimately it often saves them more money up front, and in the process that just makes them look great as a company anyways. But it's almost just to a degree it makes my blood boil, because I'm like, well, you're not really doing it because you care about helping people. Not to say that people that work in those departments don't care. I'm sure a lot of the people in that department, I'm sure they're fully aware of the realities of what they're dealing with, and they're just happy to help people in any way that they can on their level. But it's like, did you see like Whole Foods is like asking for donations and whatnot? And I'm sitting here like, guys, do you know who owns Whole Foods? Are we blind? Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, owns Whole Foods, and he has the gall to ask people for like donations for their local communities for food when he could snap his fingers and that it's all taken care of. And I'm just like, so yes, it's nice that Spotify's donating $10 million, but let's not let's.
But okay, again, they're not going to donate $10 million. They're going to match up to this big number, so they can put in their press release this big number. I think they might hit
2 for the price of 1.
They might hit hopefully around the 100K, maybe. But you know what happened when I just tried just now to go to the website linked in their press release to donate?
What?
Dangerous web page blocked. This is a known dangerous web page, and it's highly recommended that you do not visit this page. I cannot even go to the web page.
Well, that sounds like sounds like a certificate error, which is a rookie move. I mean, that's a rookie move from whatever website developer that they hired for that. But
that's all I'm claiming. But it's something, and it's a subdomain for the full domain byspotify.com, like byspotify.com. Like, why did you do that?
Well, I'd be curious to see if they fix that sometime this week. It's possible. It's just like a weird afternoon shortage where someone forgot to up their certificate. That not to fully defend them here.
This thing went live on March 25th. It went live March 25th.
I mean, it does happen to even the best tech corporations where they forget to up a certificate and a service goes down for several hours. I'd be curious to see what that looks like later in the week, but I definitely agree that's suspicious, and it's 100%. I mean, that's a rookie move.
I mean, it's just that they're trying to give away $10 million, they say, but I can't even go to their webpage. My browser won't let me. Like, I have to log in and do another thing that says I'm aware that this is a risk. Like, I can't do that.
Can you send me the link? I'm going to try and access it from my network and see what I can pull up. This is where the mediocre IT guy tries to get to the bottom of things.
Let's see.
And while I'm at it, I did go through number 4, and it was awfully similar to number 3. And I feel like I'm going to eat my words on that later, because I feel like they're not the same, but they were in the same ballpark. And
what are you talking about now?
Oh, whiskey.
Oh, okay. I forgot about the whiskey.
I last left off in number 3. It was relatively easy going. Number 4 was slightly more peated, had a little bit more body to it, a little bit drier on the finish, but it was still super similar to 3. And I feel like it's going to be somewhere in the same ballpark. With my luck, it's going to be from 2 completely different regions. And I'll just completely embarrass myself to anyone who knows Scotch, but that's probably a given anyways. So I'm getting ready to pour number 5.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know if we're going to get through all 6 because we're at an hour 8.
I can hurry up. I haven't been drinking that much of them. For clarity, I really have only been pouring like a splash, so maybe half an ounce, probably about half an ounce for each of these. And so I'm at a total of 2 ounces, maybe 2.5 if I'm eyeballing it, which isn't that much, especially over the course of an hour. And we're an hour and 10 minutes ish at this point.
So that's 2 shots in an hour, which is European more than I've ever been told.
An American shot is 1.5 ounces. A European shot is 1 ounce.
I call an American shot a long pour, also 1.5 shots.
Well, American bartenders would disagree with you. European bartenders would agree with you. I tend to like the Europeans better because that allows me to try more things without getting quite as toasty.
Oh, I like the American pour. Don't get. I like a long pour. I tend to have a long pour.
Yeah. I do. I also really appreciate it and go to order whiskey at a bar, at a venue or whatever. I'm like, that's clearly more than 1.5 ounces, and I only paid for a single. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Gotta love the heavy-handed pour.
Do love that indeed. Generosity is never unappreciated from a bartender, which makes me miss bartenders. Oh, Connor Byrne. I miss my bartenders at Connor Byrne. I was supposed to play at Connor Byrne on Friday or Saturday, and my band had this whole joking, like laughing and then crying thing about like, hey, when's loading tonight? Are we backlighting the kit? What should I wear? When are y'all getting there? And then we just cried.
Yeah, I think I went out to the bar for the last time I went to a bar was actually with my Scottish friend. And it was a lot of fun. We had sat down for a couple hours, ordered some nice scotch. It was a bit of a celebration. So got some nicer things than I would normally otherwise. And it was just a really, really great time. And I miss being able to just go out and like have a couple of drinks, have a good time, talk about stuff. And yeah, kind of missing that right now. But
I miss restaurants. I miss gigs most of all. I say I miss gigs first, the gym second, and restaurants third.
I sort of miss restaurants, but I also
like going out to a restaurant or bar.
Right. So I miss going out to a bar, but like the restaurants, my favorite thing about them is the food, the atmosphere. Yeah. Invariably, I find myself going, it's kind of loud in here. Can't really hear everybody at the table. It feels kind of awkward. I'd rather just take my food to go and enjoy it at home. So it's actually knowing that most of my favorite restaurants are still doing takeout. It's been kind of nice. So I've been trying to make a point of doing takeout once a week and trying to make a point of tipping them well, knowing that business has been down.
Yeah. Same. I mean, I've saved a lot of money. That's how I could buy a reamp box.
Reamp.
Yeah. I'm thinking about buying an Akai, what's it called? MPK Mini Mark II. It's like a little synth controller with a drum pad. And I don't know why. I probably won't use it. I shouldn't buy that.
I mean, I've been wanting something like that for forever, but I feel like those are great songwriting tools, and I know if I get one, it's going to turn into I'm going to turn into that person who's like working on an EP for 3 years and never ends up releasing it.
That's most people, but you don't always have to create with the, purpose of releasing it into the world. You can just create because it's cathartic. It's like journaling.
Right. Well, and I totally hear that. I don't know. I'm not trying to be like harsh or judgmental with that. I'm not sure if that's, I know that's good. What's going to happen when I inevitably get one of those. It's just a matter of, is now the right time for me to do that?
Is ever.
I don't know. I'm really focused on my board build right now. Just ran power for it last night, and I'm now at the stage of a board build where I'm reevaluating everything.
Yeah. Now, I was thinking about completely redoing mine or just like rearranging a lot of things, but I just rearranged. I moved the SY1 farther up my board and added the cat dirt, and now I'm looking at it again. I'm like, I don't think I want to change it.
I know. I saw your board. It was like, wow, you've got more pedals than on a board than I think I've ever seen you have. You got like 8 pedals on there now?
Please?
You've got 8 pedals on there now? Is that right?
You counted. Wow, you actually counted my pedals. That's not counting the volume pedal or my amp.
Well, I applaud you.
No, wait, that is counting my volume pedal and my amp.
Thank you.
It's not counting my tuner or my power supply.
I didn't actually count. I just remember seeing the photo and going, wow, that's a lot. And I guessed off the top of my head, but
yeah.
Congratulations, you've got a mid-sized board.
I've
Things are
had
getting
this
kind of
board for
serious.
forever, and I used to have a lot more on it. Um, I really did used to have like a dozen pedals on that board, I think. But then because it was like a case of like, oh, I want a little bit of everything. I want to be prepared for anything, and then I started actually playing with people. I'm like, I actually don't need most of these things right now. And then every once in a while, like I have my pedal train, Metro 24 classic size board. So every once in a while I'll just build out one of those for, you know, other gigs, I guess. And then I have my itty bitty little nano size board that I made myself. But I'm thinking about getting a new board, that one of those angled ones, so I can put the power underneath. Just because, but I don't really need that.
Well, I've got my flat board, which is just an IKEA cutting board, and
Right.
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pedals plus a power supply.
That's a lot of pedals.
It's on like a 18 by 12 ish cutting board, or maybe
Nice.
it might be a little deeper than 12. I think it also might not be. I haven't measured it. Actually, I've just eyeballed everything. But hopefully, it'll be up and running within the next couple of days, and we'll have
Nice.
my full rig going, ready to
I
jam.
think I think it's funny when people find out what kind of music I play, and then they look at the board I gig with, and then they compare it to the fact that they know I have a lot of very weird pedals. I'm like, well, I thought you would make a lot weirder music if with like all the pedals you have. I'm like, no, I just think they're fun.
And I've got
I make bedroom music.
the pedals I've got on my board aren't that weird, but I also like to make weird, like spacey stuff. I just kind of stretch what I've got as far as it goes. But I'm already like hitting that midpoint valuation point of like, do I want to swap that out for like a BitQuest maybe? Hmm. Do I? Do I? Or well, one of the things I was thinking about doing is because I've got so much overdrive on there. I was thinking about swapping out one of the overdrives for Walrus Congra, which is the filter and the fuzz, which could be a lot of fun.
Oh,
Um,
that could be
and
cool.
but because I've already got the board laid out, I'm like, I can only fit this exact kind of enclosure with top jacks, or else it won't fit. So I'm like really limited unless I want to undo everything I've just done.
Yeah, I mean, looking at my board, I think the mood's about like the mood's not going to be on there forever. I mostly keep the mood on there. I've never played a Sunday Crush gig with it. There are a couple parts in some of the songs where I'm like, oh, that'd be really cool to have. But mostly it's on there because I do eventually want to film a demo of it, but I need to like try it and figure it out in the real world, I think.
Right.
So, and yeah, so that's the weirdest pedal on my board. And then I have the SY1, which is kind of weird, and the David Foster Wallace. But yeah, I have fun with my stuff. But
So I
have you
just
finished that? Good. Okay,
Oh yeah, I
it's
just had number 5, and I think number 5 might be my favorite of the whole bunch. It's nice and bold. It's got a little bit of a bite to it. It kind of reminds me of and I feel like I'm going to regret everything I say when I say it reminds me of. But I had a Highland Park flight for my birthday back in October, and it forget what years are in the Highland Park lineup, but I think it was like a 12, a 16, and a 25 or something like that. But this kind of reminds me of like the same flavor profile, kind of out of that family. So hopefully I'm right. Hopefully I didn't just embarrass the hell out of myself. But that was really enjoyable, and I'm gonna have to come back for that one later. Um, and I'm on to number 6, which is the last one I've got here, and then I can read off the envelope. So closing thoughts on Spotify.
I as a music fan, I do get having Spotify. I have Tidal. I try to only stream things I've also purchased because the convenience factor is amazing. I think it should pay artists more. I generally think that in the music business, the people who actually create the art that we love and that moves us tend to get screwed, and I hate it. I hate it a lot. And I just want you used to be able to make a living doing this, and I don't want to say more easily, but just more consistently.
Right. I mean,
And
just like a more tenable
yeah, and
lifestyle.
I think that if we want to look at the things that really damage musicians a lot, I think a lot of them just factor around the fact that you can't make money selling records. Just releasing music will not make you money. You have to tour on it. You have to get sync licenses, and you have to do so much more and to really commodify your music. And touring is hard on bodies, especially the older that we get, the harder it is. And that's where a lot of the things like alcoholism and substance abuse come into play, is not just because everyone's offering these things to you while you're on tour, but because it's boring. You're in a car, you're in a van, you're getting to the venue so you can hurry up and wait for 5 hours. You show up for 4 p.m. for a sound check at 5 for your set that starts at 10. Like, it's hard.
Right. Well, that I think my take is I feel like I should be more ashamed of the fact that I use Spotify on a regular basis than I am.
I'm not saying anybody should be ashamed that they listen to Spotify. It's not your.
No, I'm
It's
not
not
saying you
necessarily
are.
the consumer's fault.
I'm not saying that you are. I feel like this only reinforces that kind of that guilt running in the back of my head. I'm like, I know I'm not really ethically consuming ? But it is really, really convenient, and the appeal is there for me, and it's a really frustrating, like, but it's so good on kind of a dichotomy. I also fully grant that the streaming quality also isn't necessarily super hi-fi. That is kind of a downside for me, but it is what it is.
Nobody cares about streaming quality. I mean, streaming quality, like anything streaming quality, is probably not going to be very good. Like anything. I think
Right.
Tidal has higher quality streaming. But I mean, it's convenience. You're playing it through your car speakers, or you're playing it through your earbuds and your Beats by Dre, which are, for the record, not good
Oh,
headphones.
that's a pet peeve of mine. Please don't get me started on it.
Yeah, we don't
Anyway,
have time for it. You better finish your last scotch.
I know. So I just tried a little bit of my last scotch. It's relatively sweet of the bunch. So I'm just gonna real quick. I'm gonna throw together kind of what my top to bottom favorites are, and I don't know if I'm gonna bother guessing with what each of them is. And then I'll just go ahead and read the list. You guys can judge me all you want, and if you Scotch whiskey snobs out there, feel free to drop me a line, tell me what I should drink next. Drop a line, tell me that I'm terrible and I should never drink Scotch whiskey again. I mean, any of those would be perfectly acceptable responses. All right,
Cool.
so number six was by far the sweetest. I actually really kind of liked that about it. It's kind of nice, but my favorite by far is going to be number 5, and it's incredibly. I know I've had number 5 before. I don't know what it is, but it's killing me. It's not. It doesn't. I know I've had it before. I know I really, really like this bottle. I'm going to say probably number 4 comes up next. It was so light. I don't know if it's an Islay, but it kind of put me in mind of kind of like a Lafroig. So maybe it's a lighter Lafroig, or not Lafroig. A lighter. Good gravy. I'm blanking super. Lagavulin. Same thing with number 3, kind of in that same category of it's still got that nice peat. Number 1 probably next, and then number 2 would probably come in last. Number 2, I felt like there's some aspects of it I really, really wanted to like, but as it all came together, it just didn't quite hit it for me. But number 2 also wasn't. was not normal as far as Scotch whiskey goes by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm gonna it's either a weird grain, maybe it's a different kind of grain. They mixed that up, or they just aged it in something completely off the wall. But it's not a standard Scotch whiskey by any stretch of the imagination. So shall we?
Sure. Shall we what? I'm okay.
Oh, I'm opening up.
Okay.
Opening up the and I just dropped a pick. There was a pick in here.
Ah.
Thank you, Tom, for the pick. I am now the proud owner of an Ernie Ball Prodigy 1.5 millimeter pick. Ooh, that is thick. I'm gonna have to play with that later. All right, so here we go. Number one, which didn't particularly love, but certainly didn't hate, was a Talisker Storm. I'll have to look that up a little bit. Number two, which is the weird oddball of the bunch, was a Wiggle Kilted Rye. There we go. That's what's different. So it's a rye. All right. Number three was a Lagavulin 8, so a very young one, which also helps explain the color. I think I slated that one for possibly being an Islay. Had that nice bit of peat to it. Number four is an Ardbeg Drum. I haven't tried anything from Ardbeg before, and I talked to Tom about that before, and I mentioned that I hadn't tried anything from Ardbeg before. All right, here we go. Number five. This is the one that I know I've tried before. Was the Lafroig Cardaeus Triple Wood Cask Strength, and I'm sure I just butchered the pronunciation on that, but I remember the day that my Scottish friend actually brought this bottle over, and I got to try a dram of it, and by far one of my favorite whiskeys I've ever tried before. And then number six is an Ardbeg 10. Again, a younger one, which explains lighter color, but nice and sweet, and I actually really enjoyed that one. So there's your little insight into my little snobbish brain. Hope you guys all don't think less of me for it.
Snobs.
I know I'm such a snob, but it is what it is. I can't help it, and I hope I don't come off as a total with a superiority complex. That's all I ask for.
I don't know if you could. I don't know if that's possible. I think that's just part of being a snob.
I try not to be, and I'm always an advocate of people like drink what you want to drink what you enjoy, drink what tastes good to you. And I also like to make jokes that I wish I enjoyed the cheaper stuff because it would just be a lot more affordable. So
It's true. It is very, 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 very true.
I feel like it's more of a curse than a blessing, but I digress. This has been a really fun episode. We should do it again sometime.
Yeah, let's do next week. Hopefully not same time next week, because now I have to turn around and edit this before and get it uploaded before midnight.
I know.
Aha. Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, I am Andrew.
I'm Emily. Thanks for listening. Thanks for understanding. Goodbye.
1, 2, 3.
Bye.